Hi everybody, I just wanted to welcome you to SSW. Adam Kogan, who normally runs the meetup, would have liked to have been here today, but I'm a terrible PA, so you're just going to have to put up with me instead.
I'm sure he's watching.
I'm sure he is as well, he promised me that he would. For anyone who doesn't know us, we build enterprise software and we also do developer training. So if anyone's interested in that, just give me a nod at the end of the talk. But tonight is all about Andrew and Samantha. I'm very excited about tonight because I've never seen a technical talk or non-technical talk with a keyboard involved, so this is going to be very exciting. I'm going to hand over now to Andrew Coates, who's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Penny. That's awesome, and welcome to all of you. Lovely to be here. Tonight, it's a slightly different session from what you normally get at the .NET user group, because it's really not about .NET, although there will be a little bit of that tucked in, because I can't help myself. Tonight is about 7 deadly presentation sins, and joining me tonight is my, I was going to say better half, but that's the best way of putting it actually, my gorgeous wife Samantha, who is a pianist, a teacher, a performer, and as it says there, a perfectionist. She's very, very good at what she does, and she's going to talk a little bit about some things first, and then I'll do a little bit more and we'll explain how that arc works in a moment. Samantha is a piano teacher, as I said. She also publishes a number of theory textbooks, a bunch of composing with repertoire and a whole bunch of things. She probably won't tell you about those things. She's very modest about it, but she's actually very good at all that stuff. I, for my sins, have been a software engineer for years now, quite some time, and I work for Microsoft, and I've been doing this presentation thing for quite some time as well, because I spent a lot of my time at Microsoft doing a job we call evangelism, where we go out and talk to people about cool stuff, spread the good word. So what we want to talk about today is basically broken up into 3 pieces. We're going to take what happens around presentations at a sort of grand scale and talk about performance in general, because really all presentations are a type of performance. And Samantha's going to spend about 20 minutes talking about how she gets her students, her music students, and how she herself gets ready for a performance and gives a performance. And what are the elements that make up a good performance, and what are the things that make up a bad performance, and how do you avoid them? I'm then going to kind of bring it down a bit closer to what we often do as tech guys, tech people, and talk about giving presentations. I'm going to talk about PowerPoint presentations and some of the sins that will commit giving PowerPoint presentations and how to avoid some of those. And then I'm going to focus down even further and talk about how to do a technical demonstration. And the demonstration is going to be even more focused performance. But through that, we're going to weave hopefully, a whole bunch of common themes. And by the end of it, what we hope to leave you with is some ideas about how you can tweak whatever you're doing, whatever you're presenting, whatever you're performing, to have the effect that you desire, and some of the things that you can avoid doing to make sure that those things are work as well as possible. So the way we're going to start this is Samantha's going to come up and do a performance, but not just any performance. She's going to do a bad performance. She's going to commit as many as possible of the 7 deadly performance sins as she can. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, when she comes up, greet her as you would any performer coming on stage. Samantha's going to play an excerpt from a Mozart piano sonata. And so without any further ado, I'd like you to welcome to the stage Samantha Coates.
Oh, I think I'll take this out. Oh, shall I have it up? No, I'll take it out. thank you for that. All right, I'm hoping that you'll all agree that that was a pretty horrible performance. I'm hoping that you were feeling a bit maybe embarrassed on my behalf, maybe a little awkward and uncomfortable as audience members. And believe it or not, I actually had to practice that pretty hard to get it to sound that way and to do that. And maybe you could just call out some of the things that I was doing wrong. What did I do that made it uncomfortable for you as an audience?
The hair's on.
Yeah, the hair thing. Mucking around with my hair on stage. Not good. What else? Just yell it out.
Criticising yourself.
Criticizing myself. Exactly. Anything else?
Obvious when you made a mistake.
Yes, I made it obvious. Made it obvious when I made a mistake. Yes. These are not cranky with the audience. Yes, and cranky with myself. So all these things that I did wrong actually fit quite neatly into 7 categories, which we will come back to later on. But the main point is that these things only happen for 2 reasons. Number 1, lack of preparation. And number 2, lack of exposure to pressure situations. So we're going to talk about how musicians prepare for performances. Now, typically, they practice. And we all know that if you want to do anything in front of other people, whether it's playing piano or giving a presentation, you have to practice. And musicians practice in order to perform. But there's actually a crucial step missing here. Now, I had a music teacher at high school. Her mantra was, if you want to give a magnificent performance, you have to practice giving a magnificent performance. It's not usually going to be magnificent the very first time you try it out in front of others. So it's not just about practicing and performing. There is a step in between. We also need to practice performing. It's no use if it only goes right in the privacy of your own practice room. We have to be able to do it in front of others. Now, we're going to talk about these 3 things today, starting with number 1. So hands up if you've heard the phrase, practice makes perfect. Okay, pretty much everybody here. Now, first of all, I dispute that. It's not necessarily true that practice makes perfect. I actually prefer the phrase, practice makes permanent. Because it's possible to be doing something over and over again and be getting really quite good at it, but it doesn't mean that what you were doing was right. So for example, here's a typical practice session of a student who is learning to play for release, and they're practicing it, and they're making a little mistake in the second bar. So they might start off like this. Oh, and they stop because they hear a wrong note. Now, what do? They'll start again. Oh, there's that mistake again. This would be perhaps a teenage girl going through it for the 3rd time. I can't stand piano, I hate life! This would perhaps be a teenage boy on 4th attempt. Oh, my bad. And this would be a student on the 5th attempt. Suddenly, the mistake disappears, and what do? They just keep going because they're so relieved that the mistake has disappeared. They don't go over it and see if they can get it right. So what has happened is they've played it incorrectly 4 times and played it correctly once, and then they kept going. So in their minds, they've practiced it 5 times, but 4 of them were incorrect. So the next time they go to play that piece, they've got an 80% chance of getting that part wrong. And it's really important for students who are practicing to understand that they have to flip that on its head. They have to get it right more times than they get it wrong for it to be an effective practice session. So when I'm trying to explain this to my students, I use sporting analogies. I pick a sport that I know they play. So let's say tennis. And I say to them, okay, so imagine your tennis coach wants you to practice serving the ball. And so you serve the ball and you hit it and, oh, it goes into the net. And so you try again, serve the ball, oh, into the net. Try again, into the net again. 4th time, into the net. 5th time you try serving, it goes over the net and it lands in the square. Now, is your coach going to say to you, oh, that was a fabulous training session, you can go home? And the kids go, no. No, that's a terrible session. He's going to make me stay there until I'm getting it over the net. and then the penny starts to drop. I say it's exactly the same with music practice. You have to be getting it consistently right to improve your chances of it going right in a performance in order to do, so you have to do effective practice. Now, whether we are playing tennis or whether we are playing the piano or learning to code, everybody who learns any skill goes through 3 stages of learning. The first stage is the cognitive stage. This is where we are just getting our head around a new skill. This is where you have to use like 99% of your brain power to be doing it. The next stage is the associative stage, where we're starting to feel more comfortable. Maybe we only have to use between 30 and 50% brain power. And then there's the autonomous stage, where we are able to do something without having to think about it very much at all. To give you an example, how many people here know how to drive a car? Is that most people? Yes? Okay, so we all went through these 3 stages when we were learning to drive. The first stage, the cognitive stage, a new learner is gripping the steering wheel very tight and is thinking a lot about accelerator versus brake and remembering that they don't have to actually actively correct the steering wheel and maybe how to change gears, except that millennials don't know how to drive manual cars, so it's mostly just they don't need to know about that. And then, so that's the cognitive stage. It's a brand new skill. The associative stage would be a teenage driver who's had a bit more experience. Now they are able to have a conversation when they're driving, they're able to listen to the radio, they're not having to concentrate so hard on this new skill of driving. And then we, as experienced adults, we're all in the autonomous stage of driving, where we are able to do a variety of things while we're navigating the car to exactly where it needs to be. So now we're going to talk about these 3 stages of learning for musicians, and I'm going to do another performance now. It's not going to contain any of the 7 deadly performance sins. I'm just going to play Happy Birthday, and I wondered if it is anybody's birthday, so that we could sing Happy Birthday to somebody, or is it anybody's birthday this week? Put your hand up. Or this month? Or this year? Oh, so now it's only Penny. No, what's your name?
Corinne.
Corinne?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to pretend it's your birthday sometime in the near future. We are all going to sing Happy Birthday to Corinne. Okay, now what I would like you to do is, while we're singing Happy Birthday to Corinne, to make it extra embarrassing for her, could you all just whip out your mobile phones and video her reaction? So I'm quite serious. Take out your mobile phone. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. We all have to sing too. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Corinne. Happy birthday to you. Excellent. Happy birthday, Corinne. Okay, so that was a really good example of an autonomous activity. You could all keep singing it without thinking about it and simultaneously take out your phone and think, or just think about how Corinne was looking embarrassed. And I could keep playing because I am in the autonomous stage with learning that piece. I've played it a lot of times. I've worked out that I've played it over 1,200 times in public because various social occasions or all my students who have birthdays. But I wasn't always in the autonomous stage. I started in the cognitive stage. So here's an example of a happy birthday score of sheet music. And in the cognitive stage, I have to sit down and decipher every little dot on that page and figure out where my hands go on the keyboard. When I'm in the associative stage, that's starting to become more fluent and I don't have to think so hard about where my fingers go. And then, when I'm in the autonomous stage of Happy Birthday, I can talk while I play. I can look at you all and encourage you to sing. I can worry that nobody actually is singing. And I can keep playing while I remember with a fright that, oops, we forgot to give Corinne her birthday present. So we actually did bring one in for you, courtesy of Microsoft. Happy birthday, Corinne! So basically any type of performance will be in its prime when we're in the autonomous stage of learning. It's a level of preparation that eases pressure at the time of performing in front of others. All right, so we've covered practice. Now let's move on to practice performing, because it's no use if you can only get it right in a practice room or by yourself. If you don't practice in front of others, we possibly end up with this phrase: I got it right at home. Now, piano teachers hear this all the time. And you may well have said this phrase if you ever learned a musical instrument when you were younger. Andrew tells me that the software developer equivalent of this phrase, I got it right at home, is it worked on my machine. So it's not an excuse. It may well be true, but that just means it hasn't been tested in enough environments. It needs to work under more than one set of conditions. So here's what I encourage my students to do to practice performing. The first thing is I encourage them to play for their family and their friends and their neighbours, and basically craft an audience for themselves for anybody that will make them feel nervous. Steve Jobs was actually very good at doing this. He was an amazing presenter, and he used to invite people to come along and listen to him do his practice runs, and he purposely made sure that they were people he was scared of. He created fear-inducing audiences for himself, because it's a great way to practice that pressure. And it's an excellent thing to do. It doesn't matter if the audience you've assembled has no idea what you're talking about as a presenter. It's still good practice for you to do it in front of other people. The next thing I tell my students to do is to record themselves. And I ask them to send me the first take, which they're often unhappy about doing. But I say, too bad, you have to send me the first take, because you don't get another chance when you're performing on stage. Also, when you listen back to your own recording, it gives you so much information. Another thing I do is try to organise as many performance opportunities as possible. Obviously not in Carnegie Hall, but in nursing homes and in local community concerts and Stedfords and exams, anything that we can do to encourage students to perform. Yes?
Do you have rehearsals?
Yes, I'm getting to that. Yes, the question was, do we have rehearsals? Yes, so I'm getting them to perform in as many places as they can to get used to performing. So this is the third thing that I get them to do. The next thing is that I deliberately distract them while they are doing practicing performing, which they find hilarious. But it's very important to be able to cope with adversity when we're performing. And the final thing is I do get them to have dress rehearsals. So I ask them, what outfit are you going to wear for your concert? Put that on and practice wearing that outfit and try to simulate the performance conditions as much as possible, because this eases the pressure at the time of giving the actual performance. So that's all about practicing performing. And now we are going to move on to the actual performing part. And this is where the 7 deadly performance sins comes into it. Because committing any one of these sins can derail even the most beautifully prepared performance. All right, so deadly performance sin number 1 is drawing attention to mistakes. That is what I was doing when I performed the Mozart earlier. Every time I made a mistake, I said, oops, sorry, or I started again. Now the thing is, it's fine to make a mistake, but it's not fine to draw attention to it. Most of the time the audience will have no clue you made a mistake, but they will know if you say oops or sorry. The next deadly performance sin is correcting mistakes. Now, musicians often play wrong notes in performances, but they're supposed to just keep going. If you stop to correct your wrong note, the audience doesn't think, oh, aha, that was the pitch I was waiting for. They just notice an interruption in the flow of the music. And it's much better to just keep going, because performing is not about perfection. Deadly performance sin number 3 is starting too fast. Again, this is what I did in my performance of Mozart. I started way too fast and it completely derailed me. The thing is, when we perform, when we get up in front of other people, it induces adrenaline, and adrenaline makes our heart beat faster and it makes us do everything faster. It's fabulous if we're trying to outrun a wild beast in the jungle, but it's not so convenient when you're trying to do fine-tuned things like play Mozart or give a technical demo. So we have to learn how to manage the power of adrenaline. Deadly performance in number 4 is number 4, altering the conditions. So that is what I did with my hair when I decided to have my hair out, and then I was flicking it out of my face at the last minute. It's not a good idea to suddenly change your environment just before you're going to perform. This is why you need dress rehearsals. The reason I've got a pair of heels as a picture there is because one time I did select a very nice pair of high heels for my performance, and I ended up with a cramp in my right calf while I was trying to pedal because I hadn't practiced like that. Now, athletes have a fantastic saying, nothing new on race day. And it's fantastic because it's correct. Athletes never change their training regime on the day of the race. They never wear any new shoes or new clothes. They've always practiced with everything in advance. And I think as performers and presenters, we can take a lot from that saying. Number 5, showing dissatisfaction. Now, when performers slump or tut or frown, what it does is not only does it broadcast to the audience that things are going wrong, but it also sets up a really bad vibe. And I tell my students they have to have a poker face. Even if they think it is the most disastrous rendition of all time, they have to pretend it's going well, because usually the audience won't pick it up. And the audience takes a lot of signs from the facial expression of the performer. So it's important not to show dissatisfaction. And that also counts for after the performance. So if somebody comes up and compliments you and says, that was fantastic, well done, even if you thought it was awful, you smile and you're gracious and you say, thank you. Performance in number 6, breaking the spell. That's what I did when Andrew had his coughing fit and I looked over at him. So when a performer looks somewhere unexpectedly, it distracts the audience and it breaks the spell. So if I had just kept on playing, perhaps Andrew's coughing fit would have gone unnoticed. Well, it was a very, very big coughing fit, so it might not have gone so unnoticed. But it's really important to not interrupt what is essentially the audience's listening reverie. And finally, number 7 is ignoring the audience. If there is no audience, then there is no performance. So how can we ignore our audience? The audience is the most important part. And I was very rude. I came straight on before, I did not smile or bow, and at the end I stomped off and I didn't bow. And that's really rude of a performance. Did you feel that it was a bit rude? And I tell my students that if the audience is clapping, you have to bow, because bowing is a way of saying, thank you for clapping for me. And so if they're clapping and you're not bowing, it's like not saying thank you for something, which is rude. And there's actually research that has been done on how important stage entrance and exit is. In fact, a particular study, some people were asked to watch a series of performances on mute. They couldn't hear anything, and they were asked to rate the performances. And the ones where the performer came on with a confident smile and bow rated much higher than the others, and they couldn't even hear what was being played. So stage entrance is vital, and appreciating and acknowledging the audience is vital. So now we've covered performing, and now what we're going to do is just flip those deadly performance sins on their head, and we're going to talk about the 7 vital virtues of performance so that we can end on a positive note. So the 7 vital virtues of performance are, number 1, ignore mistakes, prioritize fluency, control the speed, have dress rehearsals, keep a poker face, cast a spell, and number 7, love the audience. So you have been a fantastic audience. I am now going to hand over to Andrew, and he's going to talk about technical presentations and do the 7 deadly presentation sins. Now he's going to start off his segment in much the same way that I did mine. He's going to come on and he's going to do a really bad presentation. So hopefully it will be both entertaining and cringeworthy. Please welcome Andrew Coates.
Yeah, sorry, I just got to switch computers. Give me a sec here. I think that one. Oh, sorry, it just needs to. Is that better? Almost getting there. Got it on there. It's not come up here yet. Oh, there we go, beautiful. All right, and then I'll just need to bring this over here. Okay, we're ready to go. All right, so I want to talk to you about Microsoft Cognitive Services and the idea of amplifying human ingenuity. The Microsoft Cognitive Services, sorry. Wrong one. There we go. Microsoft Cognitive Services. There's lots of them. There's the vision service, which goes from faces to feelings to allow your apps to understand the images and the video. There's the speech service, which hears and speaks to your users, or it allows you to hear and speak to you by filtering noise, identifying speakers, and understanding their intent. Is that making noise again? The language service processes text and learns how to recognise what users want. The knowledge service maps complex information and data in order to solve specific tasks. The search service accesses billions of web pages, images, videos and news with the power of Bing. Bing, yeah. And there's a lab service as well, which gives you an early look at emerging cognitive services technologies to discover, try and give feedback on new technologies before they're generally available, for general availability. So that's the services. Why do you want to use cognitive services? Well, because they're easy and flexible, and they've been tested. They're easy because it's a REST API. They're flexible because that works on a bunch of different platforms. Windows, that green one, whatever. I think the blue one's iOS, Node and Python. And there's documentation all over the place. You've got to go and find it. It's cool. The cognitive... Oh no, we've seen this. I don't actually... No, sorry, don't need that one. You don't need to see that either. That's okay. What I do want to talk about is the Vision API, which is image processing algorithms to smartly identify, caption and moderate your pictures. This is the Vision APIs are great. Don't worry about reading all of that, of course. Darling, can you give... does she need the cup? Oh no. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. The Vision APIs are really great. They're lots. In fact, I've summarised them a bit here. This is probably a bit easier to see like this. I think the computer vision one and the face one are pretty cool. We probably haven't got time for a demo, I'm afraid. But another time we'd be able to do that. But there's some great resources. There's heaps of them. Just write any of those down that you think are cool. We'll probably run out of time for Q&A as well. We can just come and see me afterwards and I'll talk to you, whatever you want to talk about. And yeah, that's it. Thanks very much. Okay, be honest now. How many people here have been in one of those presentations?
Oh, no way.
The whole room. I'm not going to ask the other question, which is how many people have given one of those presentations. It's pretty horrible. And I think I committed at least 7 deadly presentation sins. And I'm going to talk about... Sorry, what was that?
More like 70.
It was more like 70, yeah. That's right. So the first one I want to talk about is this concept of structure. My presentation was completely unstructured. I don't know if you know what I was trying to tell you about. I'm not sure that I know what I was trying to tell you about. But the key to giving a presentation is to have an end goal in mind. You're either entertaining people or informing them or persuading them or teaching them. There's a whole bunch of things you could be doing, but you need to have that end goal in mind. And to actually get to that end goal, you need some structure. You need to have a path through the presentation. You need to introduce things. You need to be able to bring in logical steps, the next thing that's going to happen. And then you need to be able to guide the people that you're presenting to that end goal. And that structure is so important. So deadly presentation sin number 1 is having no structure or being unstructured. Presentation sin number 2, that's a fairly obvious one as well, poor slides. Now, this often happens when the slides are not your own. As you may have noticed, the very first slide on that that I showed you said speaker name here as the person who was presenting. I don't know if you noticed that, but that's, and this is a very common thing, particularly in corporations where people are told they've got to give a particular deck. The slides range from diabolical. Now, this is not acceptable. Don't do that. It's a hard no. Through to moderately unacceptable. Again, far too much text on this page. Again, probably not a hard no, but a no. You can convey the information with a bunch less text, and in fact, you perhaps don't need very much text at all. The idea of the slides is to support your presentation. It's not to be your presentation. The slides are an aid to help people recognise what's going on. And I hope that all of you noticed, as Sam was going through her presentation, that many of her slides had no words on them at all. They were simply images that were intended to invoke a particular mood or support what she was saying. She was talking about tennis. There was a picture of a tennis racket with someone about to serve. She was talking about the deadly presentation sin of not changing the conditions. Sorry, the deadly performance sin of not changing the conditions, and there were a pair of high heels there for a particular reason. Yeah, and there was not a lot of text on the page. Presentation sin number 3 is reading the slides. Now, this is one that I've sat through a number of times, and I've actually walked out of a number of times as well. There's nothing worse than someone just sitting there and reading through their deck. You could have given it to me and I could have read it. That would have been fine. I actually probably prefer you to give it to me in some other format, maybe like a Word document, if that's what you want me to do. If you want me to read things, then a Word document's good for that. If you want to show it to me as a video, then that's great as well. But don't read me the slides. I can read them much faster than you can speak. It also often means, it often gives the impression that you've done no preparation. If you have to read every word on the slide, then all you're doing is regurgitating something someone else has done. There's no particular value that you're adding as a presenter. So reading slides is a very poor thing. Now, I will say that there are a couple of times when it is worth reading slides or reading words on the slides. And you will have noticed that Sam read that list of vital virtues at the end of her section. I'll do the same thing when I read out my list of vital virtues at the end of my next 2 sections as well. But when you're reading things out, you've got to have a specific reason for doing it. It's not just a matter of going through every word on every slide, because we don't need that. What you do need is to be very thoughtful and planful about which words you're going to read, which words you're going to emphasise, which words you're going to bring out as part of this process. Timing is another really important part of a presentation. If you don't have your timing right, you're going to be in trouble in terms of being able to get through the content you want to get through, or finishing really early and people not thinking they've got good value out of their presentation, wondering what else you could have said. You notice that in my presentation I didn't have time for the demonstration, I didn't have time for Q&A. Probably the 2 most important things in most technical presentations. Yeah? So the timing is really key. Distraction. Like me coughing when Sam was performing, having things pop up on your screen is also really, really bad. You can adapt your conditions to have adapt your environment to have exactly the conditions you want. You can turn off these distracting pop-ups, these distracting incidents, and that's really simple to do. Of course, this is not a real pop-up, this is a PowerPoint trick, but the point I'm making here is still the same. Sign out of Slack, turn off your email, make sure you've killed all the notifications. There's a great way you can go into the Windows Mobility Center in Windows and say, I'm in presenter mode, and it turns off a whole bunch of things. There's the thing called Focus Assistant in Windows 10, which turns off different things. But having all of those things enabled means that you can concentrate on the presentation and talking to your audience. Some people do quite an interesting thing where they have nothing on their machine for presentations because they've actually got a presenting user. They've got a separate user they log in as. And therefore, there are none of the normal distractions you'd have if you were logged in as on your normal work machine. The next deadly presentation sin is one that I think that particularly as technical people, we're often guilty of. Going too deep, too fast in something. It's very rare that your audience is going to be technically as knowledgeable as you are about the particular topic you're talking about. Otherwise, less likely they're going to be at your presentation and more likely they're going to be giving a presentation if they're as knowledgeable as that. But we tend, as technical people, to think that we can start at wherever our head's at and start talking and everyone will catch up. That's often not the case. And if you start too deep or go too deep too fast, then what's going to happen is people are going to get left behind. If you wanted a great example of someone who doesn't do this, doesn't go too deep too fast, goes deep but goes at exactly the right pace, look up any one of Joe Al-Bahari's talks. Joe Al-Bahari is a guy who, a C# guy who has written a bunch of books about C#, written a great tool called LinkPad, and does wonderful presentations, technical presentations and all sorts of things. We were at NDC in Oslo in June, and Joe was there and he did a session. Joe's from Perth, but he was in Oslo as well, as were a number of Australians, which was very cool. He did a session on writing neural nets, building neural nets from scratch. And in that presentation, he went from assuming you have no maths at all to just barely holding on by the tips of your fingernails while you learnt how a neural net worked to recognise images of numbers. Very, very cool session. Did it in an hour, but he's got this great knack of starting you at this top level and getting you to the stage where you need to be to learn the things he wants to tell you. But if he had started down here, there's no way that could have happened. People would have been lost immediately. So getting too deep too fast is a really common sin. And the seventh sin that I want to talk about is this concept of ignoring the audience's needs. And in some ways, this wraps up a bunch of the things that we've talked about already. But if you can't build a rapport with the audience by telling a story or making them lean forward, then you've lost them. What you need to do is work out what it is that they want. Why are they here? What are you trying to tell them? What are you trying to persuade them with? How are you trying to entertain them? And if you ignore those needs, then as Samantha said, there's no point in doing the presentation because the audience is the reason you can have a presentation. You can't present to nobody. You can't perform to nobody. So ignoring your audience is a deadly sin. So like Samantha, I'm going to flip this on my head. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the 7 presentation vital virtues. And here are the ones here's the way I like to put them. Plan a structure. Own your slides. You're the presentation. Rehearse. Remove the distractions, build a rapport, and give the audience something to take away. So with those 7 things, you'll make a big difference. So what I'd like to do now is give you that same presentation I gave a minute ago, but perhaps to do it with committing fewer of the deadly presentation sins. Okay. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. What I'd love to talk to you about today is a thing called Microsoft Cognitive Services, and particularly this idea of taking the things that we know as humans and amplifying them through the application of computing and research. My name's Andrew Coates. I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft in Australia, and this cognitive services idea is something that's near and dear to my heart because I've got a mantra I've always said, and in fact I've presented a number of times, is that you should only write the code that only you can write. So if someone else has come along and built a whole bunch of services and codes that you can use, then you should definitely take advantage of it. Microsoft Cognitive Services provide a number of APIs and endpoints that allow you to take what is generally a human capability and get the computer to perform it for you. Vision, speech, language, knowledge, and search are all things that humans do. Yeah. But what we can do is we can take that information and we take that capability and apply it using hundreds of person years, thousands of person years of research, academic research, which has now been commoditized and made available through services. Not only do we have these 5 key services, we also have a bunch of stuff that's still in the works. We want to make sure that we can share that with you as well through our labs area. Services are really easy to use. Basically, they're a REST API. You get an API key, and you can call the service. They're very flexible in that they're very flexible in that they go on and off. They're very flexible in that they are available on a number of different platforms because they are simply a REST API. And they've been heavily tested and used by many, many large organisations around the world, including us. We at Microsoft use them a great deal for many of our own services. The services are, as I said, wide and wide-ranging and very important, but the one I want to concentrate on today is the Vision service. And in particular, the Vision API, or the Vision services, give you a bunch of algorithms that allow you to infer information from pictures, whether they're still pictures or moving pictures, and get that information out in a structured way that you can use in your applications. So you can imagine having a look at a scene like this, working out what's in that scene is quite a complex human task. What we've done though is we've taken the capabilities that have been worked on through Microsoft Research and through productization of that research, and being able to pull out that information in real time or in near real time so your application can respond to it. The Vision service has actually got 5 different APIs. Computer vision, indexing, and so on. The one I'm really going to talk about today is this concept of computer vision. The others are also really very neat, but I want to drill down into this computer vision piece, and particularly in computer vision I want to talk about character recognition and reading text. So in this demonstration I'm going to do now, what I want to do is show you how you can take a piece of text which is in an image and pull out key pieces of information in a structured form that will allow you to use it and process it. Now, pretend I did that demo. I'll do it in a minute, but pretend I did that demo. I hope you enjoyed that demo. I think it shows off some of the very key capabilities of the OCR endpoint in the Vision service of the APIs. There are lots of great resources, and while I put on the right-hand side all of the actual links that you'll need, I've really summed it up by putting a single API, a single URL up in the top left-hand corner there for you. And that URL, aka.ms/Vision API, is probably the only thing, if there's one thing I wanted you to take away from today, that would be that piece, that URL there. Because everything else I've got in this presentation, including the presentation itself, is available from that API. So folks, it's time for some questions. I've left about 5 minutes for questions. Thanks very much for listening. I'd love to have your questions now. Those were fantastic questions, and that insight that you gave me by asking those questions was really helpful. And I've taken some of those things on board. That question that Vaughan asked, particularly around the way the service works, means that I'm actually going to go and rethink some of the things that I've done, because that's a really helpful tip. Thanks, Vaughan. So I want to leave you with one last thing. The URL to take away from the end of today is aka.ms/Vision API, and if you use the Microsoft Cognitive Services, your apps will be smarter and more effective and more useful for your users. Thanks very much. So, I hope that was a slightly better version of the first presentation. You can see they were similarly based, I hope, maybe. But I hope what I did was I took you from the broad of what the cognitive services were through down to the slightly narrower about the Vision service, and then the OCR piece. And I kind of funneled it down, and I left you with a takeaway. I left you with some useful pieces of information. All right, let's move on now to our third section, which is the demonstration piece. So we started off broad. We talked about the performance in general, and Sam talked about musical performances. I've narrowed it down a bit, and we talked a bit about presentations. And now what I want to do is take you down quite narrowly focused into technical demonstrations, because they're a particular thing that we do often as technicians that are sometimes, that can be very effective, but are sometimes very poorly done. So I'm going to start in the same way by giving you a demonstration that perhaps is not the best demonstration ever. And I'll commit as many of the 7 deadly demonstration sins as I can. All right. Sorry, I just need to set this up again. Let's Visual Studio. Yeah, sorry. Yep. Okay, and then I'll just think it's this one. Okay, that's finished. That's cool. The installer's worked. That's great. So Visual Studio is just opening. It'll take a moment or two to come up. There we go. What I want to show you is you know what? I'm just going to run it, and I'll show you what it does, and then we'll talk about it some more. So I'll just run it up. This is the application that I'm going to demo, and it's going to start the functions Azure Functions piece. So I'll just put that over here so you can see what's going on. Here we go. Yeah, beautiful. And then I'll. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that looks like it's ready to go. And I'll use Postman, and we'll one of these. I think it's this one. No, this one. Getting there. Sorry, it's one of these. Oh, maybe it's set this way. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. I think that's. I'll send that. Okay. So yeah, so it's called that. That's great. And what you can see. Oh, so. Oh. Okay, that's not exactly what it's supposed to do. Give me a second, I'll see if I can figure out cancellation token. Look, you know what? I think it might be because I just did that update. And maybe if you look, we'll just. I think we might just leave that for there, and I'll come and see me afterwards, and I'm sure I'll be able to get it running and show you what it does. But it's very cool the way that image thing happens. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We'll leave that for now. All right. I'm going to ask the same question. Who's been in one of those demos?
It's a miracle you still have a job.
I'll tell you a funny story. We did this presentation at NDC in Oslo, and we did quite well in terms of the feedback. Except one person gave us really bad feedback, and I have a theory that they had popped in while I was doing either the presentation or the demonstration, hated it, and wandered out again. Perhaps without some context. Anyway. So, demonstration sins. Now, there's a few of them that I committed there. Perhaps more than 7, but we'll talk about 7 of them. The first one is this concept of an uncontrolled environment. If you don't control your environment before you do your demo, you can be in real trouble. My uncontrolled environment error was I updated Visual Studio as I was about to go on stage. And, I've made that mistake once. Try not to do it again. It's a horrible, horrible feeling when you cannot figure out what was going wrong, and it turns out that the thing that you've just applied has introduced some regression into the .NET framework somewhere down the line that you'll find out when you do a Google search or a Bing search, half an hour after your presentation. Don't do that. It's interesting. I ran this demo this morning to make sure that it was all going, and a bunch of my API keys had expired, so I'm glad I did that before I brought that on stage. But having an uncontrolled environment is a bad sin. In fact, like I said before, with presentations, people are often have a user that they just log in as, and you can do the same thing for your demos. You can. There's a whole bunch of things I'll talk about in the next piece that you can use for having a demo that is that takes advantage of a whole lot of backstops you can put in your environment. But not controlling your environment is a deadly sin. The next thing that's bad is having a demo that's brittle. Now, I'm a civil engineer by training, and one of my lecturers, we're talking about lecturers, Sam talked about her teacher today, I'll talk about my lecturer. One of my lecturers, who was my structural engineering lecturer, talked about these 2 concepts that every structure needs to have. It needs to have a load path, and it needs to have ductility. And a load path is a way for the load to get from wherever it's applied down to its supports. And its ductility means that if something fails, then the structure can shift to redirect the load path so that the structure doesn't collapse. There's no point having a bridge that will fall down if one piece of it breaks. What you want is a bridge that settles a bit, moves around, but still has enough structural integrity that you can get the people off it or whatever else you need to do before you repair it. Same with buildings, same with any other structure. Brittleness is bad in structures, and it's really bad in demos. If one particular little thing goes wrong, it could throw out your entire demo. That's a bad demo to have. If you've got backups and ways of recovering from failures or unexpected errors like Wi-Fi going down, that makes it a non-brittle demo, or as we'd say in the structural engineering world, a ductile demo. And the ductility can be things like having a set of screenshots that you want to show that aren't actually the demo but can show you all the things you want to show. Or it can be a video, a screen capture, or it can be an offline version of whatever it is you're building. Or even if you're doing a complex end-to-end demo, a bunch of checkpoints in your VM that allow you to get forward or back to a known good point. So if you have a demo that's got 5 or 6 stages to it, and stage 1 is dying, if you've already got a saved state of your VM that you know works for the end of step 1, then that's fantastic. Other people do it with tags in their source control software. So if you go into GitHub, you might tag a bunch of different commits as being at a particular point in your demo. And you can roll forward or back to that particular part of your code just by calling a script. We talked about this in presentation, but it's just as bad in demonstrations. The idea of going too deep too fast. I jumped straight into my code without any explanation about what was going on. It failed, so it left you with absolutely no knowledge. Yeah? And even if it hadn't failed, you probably still wouldn't have known what I was talking about, because I jumped far too quickly into the weeds. Which brings me on to the next thing. The demo itself was too complex. You don't actually know this, but there were moving parts all over the place. Now, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't demonstrate complex things. What I'm suggesting is that you should take out the essence of what it is that you want to talk about and demonstrate that. It could be part of a complex project, and you should definitely talk about where this piece fits in the complex project, and perhaps even demonstrate these several pieces working together. But having a complex demonstration where people in 5 minutes have got to try and grok your entire model and work out what's going on is just too hard. It's too hard for them. Demonstration sins number 5 and 6 are closely related. Number 5 is winging it. This idea, and it's something that we often do as technical people. I know I do as a technical person often. I try to avoid it as much as I can, but I catch myself doing it sometimes. And I know that others do as well. Is we think because we are good or know about a particular technology, we can speak about it fluently and accurately and convincingly. Often we can't, because we've developed a whole bunch of shortcuts in our mind for what we're trying to say and how we understand things. And if we try and use that understanding to explain to somebody else, then they won't know. So what we need to do is we need to have a structure, build up a structure to our demonstration that takes people from no knowledge or almost no knowledge through to the point where they can start to understand what we're showing and then see what they're seeing. But if you try and start here, there's no way your audience is going to catch up. The other thing that is a deadly demonstration sin, which is similar, sounds similar to this, but is slightly different, is this concept of improvising. One of the things that I've seen many demonstrations come undone with is when the demonstrator decides that they've had a great idea about how they could enhance their demonstration on stage. And they decide, oh, if I just do this, maybe I'll do it with a multi-page document instead of a single-page document. Or maybe I'll do it with I'm pretty sure it should work with a PNG as well as a JPEG. And they'll just wing doing that as well. They'll improvise it. Many times that goes badly wrong. And derails what otherwise would have been a very good presentation, one where they had thought about the structure, they brought people along on the journey, they had a very good explanation about what was going to happen, and they had an end result in mind. But by improvising, they got sidetracked and lost their train of thought, and they lost the audience. And potentially they derailed the demonstration. Which leads us on to demonstration sin number 7, which is ignoring the audience's needs. And you can see that this might be part of that. I said we were going to weave a thread through the 3 performance, presentation, and demonstration pieces. Well, ignoring the audience is a thread, part of that thread that you might have recognised. Ignoring your audience is you need to build that rapport again. You need to understand what they know and what they don't know. You need to bring them along on the journey and keep them informed as to why you're telling them this, why you're showing them this, why are they spending their time with you. Understand their level. And one of the things that I think I've also noticed that happens quite often, particularly in technical circles, is this concept of an in-joke. The presenter or the demonstrator will find a particular person in the audience they know well, they'll do a bit of banter with them, and they'll leave the rest of the audience out. So your entire audience needs to be involved, not just the people with whom you're familiar or comfortable. Once again, though, let's turn this on its head, and instead of going negative, we'll go positive. The vital virtues of demonstrations, the 7 demonstration vital virtues. Control your environment, have a backup plan, establish some context, focus on the prize, rehearse, stick to your script, and give the audience something to take away. Those 7 will make a demonstration much, much better than the one you just saw. So, having said that, let's move on to doing the demonstration, maybe a good version of the demonstration that you just saw. So, to do this, what I want to do is I want to set some context. There's a large government organisation in Australia. I can't tell you who they are, of course, because that would be breaching confidence, but they collect money from us and give it to other parts of the government to do things like infrastructure and so on, and pay our public servants. And they have a process whereby they take money from you, and most of the time they just believe you when you tell them how much money you should give them. But sometimes they say, no. You need to justify why you have not given us as much money as we think you should have given us. You've claimed these things which you've called work-related expenses, and we would like to know how you justify that. And what you do is you basically give them a shoebox full of receipts, and they take those and they put them in a folder somewhere, and then people look at those receipts, each one of them, and work out whether it's yes, it's a deductible expense, or no, you can't take that off and you owe us more money. This piece in the middle here is something that that this government department decided would be a really useful thing to try and be able to at least automate to some extent. And to do that, they needed a process whereby they could do some artificial intelligence, some work to work out whether this particular expense is likely to be deductible. And to do that, they needed to be able to read those receipts. So they wanted to be able to put this non-human intervention in before the human piece. And if the AI system decides that this thing is deductible, then yes, you can deduct it. And if the AI system doesn't decide it can be deductible, then it pushes it off to the humans to have a look at. Yeah? And so what we were asked to do was help them build a proof of concept to show that we could read the appropriate information off a receipt. They didn't ask us to build the AI piece. They didn't ask us to do what they just wanted to be able to look at the receipt and pull information off it. So this particular receipt here is a good example for a taxi. They want to be able to get the ABN, they want to be able to get the total, and they want to be able to get the date. Now, you can probably quickly find those, they're just there, all right? But what we need to be able to do is they do that for a multitude of different receipt types, a multitude of different fonts and so on, and be able to pull it out in a structured format that gives the system enough information that it can start to make decisions about whether a taxi ride is something that a hairdresser should be able to claim, or 100 bags of cement is something that an office worker should be able to claim, all that kind of thing. Yeah, we can pull that information out of there into this format, and that'd be really useful. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a cognitive service to read the text on the form and then work out where each of the pieces of the text are on the form and infer a model from our system as to what the receipt looks like. And we can find things like specific strings. So we could use regex, for example, to find things that look like an ABN. We can work out that there's the letters ABN around the same area and those sorts of things. But the key thing we need to be able to do is find the text on the form. And this is a non-trivial task if you want to write it yourself. I think I think that's a technical term for it, non-trivial. But the way we can do it is actually just through a couple of lines of code now, because as I said, with the Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services, what you can do is send this image off to an API and have that recognition done for you through a service. That means that you can take advantage of the hundreds of thousands of person years of development work and research work that's been done, and simply pay a very small amount to have any particular image recognised. So if we drill in a bit further, all we need to do is do a post to an API. And what I want to do is show you how easy it is to do that post to the API. I'm not even going to open Visual Studio. What I'll do is I'll go into Postman, and in my in here, I'll show you the call. Now, this detail at the top here, is all just a sorry. Is all just an API call. And all this information comes from the Azure portal. And the documentation about where you find it and so on in the portal itself. And that's very simple to set up. And the URL I'll give you at the end has got pointers to all of this. But what I want to point out is it's just a simple post to an API, which of course you could do with anything other than .NET. I mean, you could do with .NET, but you could do with other things other than .NET as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in the body of this call, I'm simply going to attach a file, which in this particular case is an image, that image that I showed you before. I'm going to send that off to this API, and what's going to happen is it's going to go off and it's going to come back. It's giving me a 200. It's going to come back with all the information about the text that was found on that form. And in this particular case, there's some text you found there, cab charge, and its bounding box for that text starts at 130 in the top left, 121 high, and so on, and is this wide and this tall, and so on. And there's lots and lots and lots and lots of those. It's just JSON, because when it's JSON, we can do whatever we want with it. We can now do some manipulation, and the other nice thing is that because there's this is a very common problem, there are people who have solved it for us already. Regan Murphy is one of my colleagues at Microsoft, and he has written a bunch of libraries that allow you to take that information back from the Cognitive Services API and reconstruct the receipts in a form that allow you to go and analyse them. So all that stuff is up there as well. But the key thing I wanted to point out here is that with very, very little effort, very few lines of code, we can go and take advantage of a hugely powerful service in the OCR service. So thank you very much. All right, time to wrap it all up. What I want to leave you with is this. Now, I've deliberately made this slide really, really busy. This is our 7 vital virtues for each of performances, presentations, and demonstrations. As I promised, we would weave a thread through these, and really, once you've taken a picture of that, I'll show you the 2 that really matter. Here. Yep, picture's almost done. Come in and get a selfie. The 2 that really matter are these: rehearse and love your audience. These are the 2 key things for performances, for presentations, for demonstrations. These are the things that are going to make all the difference to whether you can be informative, entertaining, persuasive. Those are the things that you want to be able to do. Now, of all of the people who I've seen present, the person who rehearses the most is Sam. Of all the people who involve the audience, the person who I've seen do most audience participation is Sam. And there's actually one presentation that I've seen her do that multiplies those by about 12. So, at the start, Sam did a bad performance, and then I got to do a bad presentation and a good presentation, a bad demo and a slightly better demo. But we didn't ever see a good performance from Sam. So we thought we could bring her back up and do a performance at the end, and she could play the Mozart, but meh. What I thought I'd really like to show you is a fantastic presentation that she's done, and as I said, took the most rehearsal and was the most audience participatory that I've ever seen. So what I'd like to do is ask Sam to come back up, and I'm going to get her to do this presentation that was done at Ignite. And Ignite is a presentation style that where you have a 5-minute presentation that has 20 slides that auto-advance every 15 seconds. So you don't get to control the slides. You've got to have rehearsed this really well because you've got to be bang on with every one of them. And what's more, you have to involve the audience because normally the audience is a bar full of moderately drunk people. So I hope you've all had a beer. So I'd like to bring Sam up to do this next presentation. I'm going to be the one pressing the clicker next, and from then on, the slides will auto-advance themselves. So Sam's going to take you from 0 to Muso in 5 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, so tonight I'm going to teach you all how to sight sing, which means to sing a piece of music and read it at the same time. So even if that looks like gobbledygook to you right now, in 5 minutes when we come back to this slide, you're all going to be singing it and reading it. So we're going to start with 1 bar of music. Swirly thing on the left is called a treble clef. And here's our starting note. I'm going to sing this to you. I would love it if you would sing it back. Mi, re, do.
Mi, re, do.
That sounds excellent. So let's move to 2 bars of music. And you can see the second bar is not the same as the first. So I'll sing it to you and then you sing it back. Mi, re, do, mi, mi, mi.
Mi, re, do, mi, mi, mi.
Beautiful. All right, what if we add a third bar? And you can see the third bar is just the same as the first bar. So now let's sing all of this. Here we go. Mi, re, do. Now just me's. Mi, mi, mi. Mi, re, do. Excellent. What if we add a fourth bar? And you can see the fourth bar is just the same as the third and the first. So now we can sing all of this. Mi, re, do, mi, mi, mi. Mi, re, do, mi, re, do. Okay, beautiful. So what if we put all of that in a box at the top? Now, can you see a difference in the box at the bottom? See in the second bar, there's more me's. It sounds like this. Mi, 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 mi.
Mi, 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 mi.
So that's our difference in the second bar. So now we're going to sing our 4 bars, starting with the mi, re, do. Here we go.
Mi, re, do.
Now lots of me's.
Mi, 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 mi. Mi, re, do. Mi, re, do.
Excellent, that's excellent singing. Now let's put all of this in a box at the top. And can you see a difference in the box at the bottom? Yes, there's more notes in bar 3. There's lots of them, but it's fun to sing. It goes like this. So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so.
So, 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 so.
Great. Okay, so let's put that into our 4 bars. From the mi, here we go.
Mi, re, do.
Mi, 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 mi. Now fast. So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so.
Mi, re, do.
You guys sound fantastic. All right, let's play Spot the Difference again. So, do you see a difference between the top box and the bottom box? Yes, there are more notes. The first and the last bar sound like this. Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Okay, great. So we're just going to start and end our melody like that. Here we go.
Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Mi, 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 mi.
So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so. Mi, mi, re, re, do.
That's awesome. It sounds so good. Okay, let's play Spot the Difference again. So what do you notice? The difference between the top and the bottom. Can you see in bar 2 there's a little X? That's the musical symbol for a clap. So we're going to do this. Mi, 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 mi.
Mi, 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 mi.
Okay, excellent. So now we're going to incorporate that into our 4 bars. Here we go. Mi, mi, re, re, do. Mi, 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 mi.
So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so.
Mi, mi, re, re, do. That's excellent reading. Excellent. Okay, let's do it again. We'll spot the difference between the top box and the bottom box. What is happening? There are more claps. That's right, in bar 1 and 4. So we're going to do this. Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Great. So now our melody starts and ends like that. Here we go. Mi, mi, re, re, do. Mi, 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 mi.
So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so.
Mi, mi, re, re, do. Fantastic. Now that is our Ignite melody. So we're going to do this again and we need to sing a bit louder and clap a bit louder. Here we go. Mi, mi, re, re, do. Mi, 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 mi.
So, la, so, la, so, la, so, la, so. Mi, mi, re, re, do.
Terrific. Okay, now here is another part. This is a harmony part. If you can already read music, sing along with me. It goes like this. Mi, fa, so, fa, mi. Mi, fa, so, fa, mi. Do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do, ti, do. Okay, so that's the harmony part. Now we're going to put these two together. So let's have a rehearsal of just the first bar. You are going to sing mi, mi, re, re, do, and I'm going to put the harmony part on the top. Here we go. Mi, fa, so, fa, mi. See? Didn't that sound awesome? Okay, now we're going to have a rehearsal of just the last bar. So the harmony part is do, ti, do. If you want to join in, your part is mi, mi, re, re, do. Here we go. Do,
Mi, mi, re, re,
do.
do.
Oh yes, that was really good. So now we're going to put it all together. And here we are back at the first slide. You have gone from 0 to muso. So you're going to sing your part. I'm going to harmonize. Here we go. Mi, fa, so, fa, mi. Mi, fa, so, fa, mi. Do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do,
Mi, mi, re, re,
ti,
do.
do. That sounded fantastic. Well done. Give yourselves a clap.
So folks, thanks very much. I hope you've got something out of this and that in future when you give a performance or a presentation or a demonstration, either you'll sing along with your audience or you'll rehearse and love your audience. Speaking of loving your audience, we've loved having you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the people on SWTV. Great to see you guys as well. And we'd love to take questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Question.
Are there questions? Penny's got one.
What do you do when nobody responds to you? How do you get people to interact with you? You ask a question and everyone blanks.
That's an awesome question. So I'll just repeat it in case the microphone didn't pick it up. What do you do when the audience doesn't respond? You ask a question or you ask for some participation and everyone blanks. You want to start?
It's a tough one. Basically, it's when you've got a tough crowd. What do? Basically, you just end up answering your own questions, or if people are mumbling, then you pretend to hear something. And you say, that's right, that's exactly what I was talking about. And you kind of improvise on that.
A bit like Vaughan's question before.
And you just have to keep going and move on and maybe pare back a little bit of the audience participation that you've planned if it's obvious that the audience are not keen on it.
I'd add to that it does help to have thought about your audience beforehand, and so we altered our thinking a little bit for the presentation when we did it in Oslo, because the Norwegians aren't necessarily the most demonstrative of people, and so we had to think about how we were going to get some of that participation back. It does help to have amusing slides, things that little bits that people sort of pick up on and giggle about, because it just lifts the mood a bit. And getting people to sing probably helps too.
And in Norway, they had a different happy birthday song. Yes.
Any others? Yeah.
Yeah, you were speaking about at the beginning, with your students having, with your students having adrenaline, and sometimes you shake or you're really nervous. So I was wondering, in performance, do you have any advice on how to deal with that?
Yes, performance anxiety is a very, very difficult thing to deal with, and the only way to deal with it is to practice performing. So everybody has a different level of adrenaline that goes through them, and everybody has a different physiological reaction to that adrenaline. So for some people it'll be shaking, for other people it'll be sweating or sweaty palms or just heart racing, and these are symptoms that we need to get under control and channel them into the performance. So people who are seasoned performers still get nervous, they still have that nervous energy, but they're able to put it into their performance. It doesn't come out of their bodies in ways that derail their performance. So for students who tend to experience a lot of these physiological reactions, the only way to get over that is to actually just simulate lots of small performances and get them used to it. But also, partly the reason why you get really anxious when you perform is if you're not prepared enough, because you're just so nervous that something's going to go wrong. It's usually because you haven't practiced it enough. So if you've got enough preparation and enough preparation and practicing performing, it usually can lessen those.
This is just adding based on my own experience. If you're going to do a presentation like on NDC Oslo and all that, I find that it also helps to do the same presentation as a practice run at a user meetup, and as a user group or a meetup, and that just helps you to kind of get used to them. It's kind of like a dress rehearsals, but on a much smaller scale before going and presenting to a couple hundred people.
That's an excellent bit of advice. In fact, we did exactly that. We presented at the Microsoft Reactor, and we did one other as well. Presentation. So it really is very important to run the whole thing. And I would say that one of the things that Sam talked about was videoing performances. I would suggest that videoing yourself giving a presentation is a very, very useful thing as well. Set yourself up with a screen behind you and you're at a lectern and just present to a video camera. You'll be surprised how much you'll pick up, and you'll also be surprised how much of a difference it makes speaking your presentation out loud. So you're not doing that for the first time when you're in front of an audience, because it's all very well to read through something you've written, or to think through in your head something a turn of phrase that you've decided you're going to use. But if you haven't actually uttered it out loud, then it's much more difficult to come up with on the day, and it's much easier to stumble over what you're trying to say.
What do you do if you've got one audience member always answering the questions and always asking the questions?
Oh yeah, good question, Ruby. Like that really annoying person in your tour group who just monopolises the tour guide's time. Yes, what to do if one person won't stop asking questions. A really good thing to do is to say, that is such an excellent question, and I'd love to talk about that with you later on, because we haven't quite got time now, but I really want to speak to you about that afterwards. And it just then shuts that person down, gives them a strong message that that they're going to be talked to after, well, not talked to afterwards, but they're going to be talked with afterwards. But that's what I found, certainly in workshops. Piano, there are a lot of piano teachers who like to monopolise other people's times, and so it's a matter of acknowledging the question and just saying, that's an area that I probably I'm not going to be able to cover today, but I'd love to talk about that with you in the break. Have you got strategies for that?
No, I think that's a great idea, and you've seen this in lots of technical presentations where someone wants to assert their alphabet about how clever they are. They'll come up with all sorts of scenarios or comments or or things wrapped in a question, but actually are not questions. They're really just trying to show how smart they are. I think, as Sam said, the way to shut that down is to listen politely once, and then tell them you're going to talk to them afterwards. And ignore them if they're putting their hand up all the time. Then find someone else who has a question, or just not be able to see them. Any others? Yes, so folks, thank you very much for tonight. I really appreciate you coming along and listening to us. Don't forget, if you're giving a presentation, rehearse and love your audience. Cheers.